Okay, so hopefully you can hear me all right and you can see what I can see. If you can't, this is going to be a waste of about 20 minutes. So this is Ableton, a very reasonably priced piece of software, well worth it. I think if you are rooted in dance music, it's a good place to be. It's pretty straightforward and simple, but if you dig into it, it's very powerful, very powerful. I know a lot of producers have switched over to it. And I don't think you'd be disappointed, and this is what you see when you open it up. What I'd suggest is, if you are brand new to this software, go to the help tab, and in here there is I think if you click on help view, and on the right hand side you've got these lessons, and I would really suggest just going through the lessons. Just grab a cup of tea. Here's one I made earlier. And I would yeah, just go through it, just next page, it'll give you some basics, it'll show you where buttons are, because otherwise I'm just going to be telling you some really boring stuff, but a lot of it's kind of self-explanatory. You've got the playback controls up here, you've got some looping controls here if you want to create a loop to work on. These are basically your channels. MIDI channels are for playing MIDI instruments, and audio channels that are playing audio. That will become sort of explained as I go along. But this first tutorial we're going to keep very, very simple. You kind of got two sides to Ableton, and you'll know this once you've done those live help tutorials. So if you haven't, go away, pause this, do that, you know, spend a few evenings reading through and then come back. But essentially you've got two sides to Ableton. You've got this sort of creating loops side. I'm sure there's a technical term for it, but essentially you can create different sections and variations of drum loops and MIDI parts, and then you can trigger them over here at different stages to kind of write and arrange your track. But a lot of the time, if you hit the tab key, you can go straight into this page, which is much more a traditional kind of DAW view. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of these two MIDI channels, because for this particular tutorial I don't need it. So you can do that. You can select one and then hold down shift, select the other, right click and delete, and you're left with these two audio channels. Now what I'm going to do here is show you how to do a DJ mix. For a lot of DJs it's a good way to start. It's fun, it's, you know, it's within the kind of understanding of what you're already doing, so it should make sense, and you can start simple and get more complicated, and the way I've kind of designed this is that it will lead you into being able to make some bootlegs. So basically I'm going to take a couple of tracks, I'm going to drop them in. What have I got? I've got this one, and I guess chuck in this one. And what you see is you've kind of got that audio waveform that you see when you're DJing, and you've got two channels, and over on the channels here you can see this is volume control here, so you can go up and down. You can all double click it and type in a number. You can solo, you've got panning, so very much like on a DJ control system. But what you're doing is the way that Ableton works is it has an overall central control for its BPM, so you determine what you want the overall BPM to be up here. So let's say we want it to be 124, and then you set the tracks up so that they then move to whatever tempo you create. And the way you do that is you select the track, and down in the bottom right hand corner here you can see a small version of the audio file. If you click on it, it gives you some more tools. Down here on the left there's some basic, you can transpose it, so you can move it up and down in key, you can change the volume, you can do some fine tuning if you want. You've got different warp modes, which is quite useful actually, because particularly when you're doing DJ mixes, I tend to use Complex Pro. Some people don't. I know Rich, who I work with, he likes to use repitch because he wants it to sound like a sort of a more vinyl DJ, you know, so you can hear that change. But I use Complex Pro. It's like the cleanest, sort of most detailed way of controlling the track. So the first thing you want to do is you can use this. You see, if you move the cursor around in different places, it changes to different shapes. That one, if you want to sort of play the track, This one, it's actually someone holding a magnifying glass, and if you drag up or down, you can zoom in and out, and if you drag right and left, you can move along the track. And what we want to do is, if you click where you want to zoom, which I want to zoom right in the beginning, what you want to do is, you can see this little yellow marker, you want to create one of these as close to the beginning of the first kick as possible, because you want it in line, so it's in time. And you do that by double clicking, and then you can double click on the one you don't want, and you just move this over to the first beat, so this now lines up. Now this is telling me that this is 120 BPM, at least that's what Ableton thinks it is, and we can have a look, and in this instance it hasn't got it right, because I can see the kick is going out of line there. So what you can actually do is, you can zoom in and create another marker. I'm just doing a rough one at the moment, and I'm dragging it out so it's roughly in line, and actually it's more 124, so I'm going to delete that one again. I'm going to click on that first marker so that it lights up the control of the tempo. I'm going to double click, I'm going to type in 124, and I'm pretty sure it's 124. I mean, that's, you can see there, that's pretty accurate. Now Ableton tends to kind of drift, or records tend to try to drift near the end, so sometimes it's worth just zooming into the end of the record and having a look and making sure the kick has stayed in line, which on this track it has. So that's our first track. We've set it to Pro, we've got the tempo, and it's lined up, and that track now, if I solo that and play it, will change with the tempo of the overall project. So that's that one done, and the next one, we're going to have a look at that again. We're going to zoom in. Now in this instance, Ableton seems to have picked it right, which is handy. It says it's 122, so let's have a look. Those kicks seem to be staying in line, so that's good. Now I'm going to go to the end of the track. These, by the way, markers reference how much of the track you've got visible. So if I shorten it there, you'll see it shortens it there, so that's basically the visible part of the clip. But I'm going to drag it right out to the end, and in fact this looks like a track that I've already used, because there's already a warp marker there, so I've already corrected it myself early on. So now we've got two tracks, right? So the first thing we want to do, we want to drag these tracks out so we can see the full track, and we want to decide where we want them to mix. And essentially what I tend to do is, I tend to bring the volume down on all my tracks. So I'll select both those tracks again, hold down Shift and click on each one of them, double click on the volume, and I'll go -6, because that will mean that the master here won't overload, because that can be a real problem. And we're going to put a limiter on that at the end to kind of control the mix and make it sound all even and professional, but I'll show you that in a minute. So next up, we're looking at the mix. Let's decide where we want it to mix. First of all, the second track, I'm just going to quick listen to it. So I kind of like it there, really, sort of that, those first 8. And now, where do I want it to cross over? So maybe there, it's quite a nice place. So I move that over. So I've got those, I think that was right, those 4 there. And you've got that one there. So what you're going to have is the vocal ending around here and the drums starting here. Now what you can do is, you see this line here, whenever you click on anything in Ableton, so if I click on the muting of the channel here, you can see now that line relates to what's called the automation of the mute button, but what I want is the volume. So I click on the volume, and this is showing me the volume, and you can click and make these little points, and basically you can drag the volume down, so now that volume will fade in over that period. So what happens here is, it's not not a bad place for it to cross, but it needs a bit of tidying up, so we'll look at that. So I'm just going to do a little thing here. So that's where that drops, so I don't want any drums there, so I'm going to move them out of the way, but I may do something with those drums in a second. Because sometimes what you want is, you want a nice tight cut, but you don't want the melody. So where that crosses, so there, I might actually remove that bit. I'm just going to solo this and find some drums like that, and I'm going to select, let's have a look, I think it's 8 bars of those drums, and I'm going to put them there, because then what will happen is, and you won't notice it in the mix, the drums will just end nicely. I'm just going to remove, you can double click to remove a point, by the way, if you don't need it. So what we want now is, so now that kind of cuts really hard, but when you add the other track back in, so now that sounds smooth as. You know, and you know it's happening because we've made it, but trust me, the listener won't pick up on that. So now you've got a really nice smooth mix. And there you have it, your first kind of DJ transition. Now, for doing the third record, there's a number of ways you can do it. You can add a new audio track. So you can have 3 tracks. Again, set your volume to -6 and then drag in another track, or you can just work on 2 tracks if you want. Remember that if you're working on 2 tracks, you have to remember to bring the volume and anything else that you add back up. For example, we'll do one more mix and we'll do a slightly more complicated mix. Let's use this. I don't know if this is the right track. Let's use that. So again, we load that in, we zoom in. Again, it hasn't put the kick in, it hasn't put the marker in the right place. I kind of think that's where that kick starts, with that big bump there. Double click, get rid of that one, drag that over. Now we've got our kick. Now it says it's 124. Yeah, it's looking pretty good, so I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to zoom in at the end. Actually, it stayed right on. Oh no, it's gone a little bit out. So again, if you want to be a bit of a, I mean, production is about being a bit of a nerd, you can pull that in and tidy that up. So that's done. And the good thing, by the way, about this is if you were to select all these tracks now, down the bottom here in this control, you can see you can change them all to Complex Pro at the same time. And if you click the save button, it will actually create a little file that will now be saved next to your track that will remember all of those warp markers that you did. So next time you want to do a mix and you drag that track in, all of that work is already done, so you don't have to do it again, which is very handy if you're doing a weekly show like I do. Saves you a load of time. So let's have a look at this next mix. I kind of see that's where the track, you can sort of see it thinning out there. So that thins right out. Now let's do a little bit of a longer mix just to kind of, so let's put the volume in there like that. Right. Now what I'm going to do on this one, I'm going to find where this track ends. Right, so that's where that ends, right? I'm going to put a little volume control. But now what I'm going to do, over on the right hand side, we've got some audio effects, and we're going to put a filter on. And again, if you've been through the help, this will make more sense, but essentially you're going to drag that filter onto the channel of that second track. It then appears down here, and at the moment it's set to cut off all the highs, so act as a high pass filter, never know, but anyway, it gets rid of all the highs. But actually I want it the other way around, so I'm going to click it and I'm going to drag it over. And again, you've got the frequency there and the resonance there, which most DJs will understand. You can get really into this, by the way. It's very powerful. But for this instance, we're just going to use it as a filter. Now what I want to do is I want that filter off because I don't want it affecting the track. And it's something quite good you can do. You can do this live. if you press play before and then hit record, you can actually sort of do a bit of DJing live. So I'm going to do that for this first one as an example. So I'm going to hit play, hit record, and then watch me on the auto filter.
Oh, do you wanna be loved like this?
As you can see, it's drawn in all the automation that I did, but it always stops and resets back to its original position. So here you can see that filter has dropped back down, which I don't want it to do, so I'm just going to drag that up. Also, what you can do is you can zoom in, and if you select one of these and you hold shift, you can actually delete all the others and just draw a nice smooth line in like that. But I didn't do that right. Hold on, drag that, let go of that. Make sure you let go of the mouse before the shift key. And again, if I click on resonance down here, it brings up the resonance that I was using. Again, I quite like what that was doing, but I may just kind of smooth that off a bit like that. Now what I also want to do, I think, is I want to add a reverb effect. So I'm going to go down, find the reverb, drag that onto the channel. Now I've got this reverb here. Again, I want to turn the decay up to about 4 seconds, and this is the dry wet mix. Again, that's the amount of reverb that you're hearing, and that's how long the reverb will last. And actually, in this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the dry wet, and now I've got this control here. I'm actually just going to do it by hand, and I'm going to draw in some reverb. But right at the end, I'm going to have it peak like that, and then I'm going to have it come down sort of like that. And you'll see, I actually think this volume needed to come up a bit earlier when I was listening to it, so let's see what we've got. So there you go, that sounds pretty smooth. And again, with parts like that, what you could do is you could add a new audio track, and we could add in like a bit of an acapella. I don't know what tempo this acapella is. It's 128. Oh, this is one I've used before, which is quite handy. And you could do this, you know, turn the volume down, and so you could do this.
Oh, do you wanna be loved like this?
Do that. And the good thing about Ableton is if you select that block, even though that's the only bit of audio, if you drag and select those two blocks and then Control D or duplicate, you can actually just do that, and then all of a sudden
Do you wanna be loved like this? Do you wanna be loved like this?
We've got a little basic effect there. I mean, I'm keeping it really simple. Again, you can go into your audio effects, maybe put on a bit of delay. Might be quite nice. Turn the feedback up, set how you want it to delay. I'll just leave it like that. And again, and I can actually hear that is a little bit out of time. So if I double click and I can select all of those like that, I actually want to hold down the Alt key and I can drag them back because it sounded a little bit lazy. That should sound better. So there you have a 3-track mix with a little vocal effect. Now at this point you want to click on the master channel, which is down here. Again, you can hit tab and you can see that master channel there if you want to do it that way. But all we need to do is we need to stick a limiter on here, and this is just to tidy it up a little bit. So we select the limiter, we drag it onto the master channel and it appears there, and we have a look how much where the peaks are of the track. And really what we probably want to look at is where we're doing a lot of stuff, which is like here. And you can see at the moment it's not really touching it much, but if you turn up the gain and you just adjust it until it's tickling it, so you can see that was just tickling it there.
But he does a thing that makes me feel alive. Yeah, he knows me. He knows me.
And that will give you a nice even but not squash.
You don't want to know, when I tell you, you don't have to know.
Sometimes if you find that one track is not hitting as hard, you can adjust the volume of it slightly. So just bring that volume up.
You don't love me, you should let me know.
That's better. So now you know those 3 tracks have got an even mix. You can select them and you go File, you go Export Audio, and there you have your mix. So hopefully, yeah, that's just enough to get you going. The reason I've done that is because a lot of DJs will be able to make sense of that, and it's something you can play with, and you could do 2 hours worth of mix sitting in front of your TV on your laptop. I've used no special plugins. There's nothing clever going on. It's just the basic program and some tracks. But the idea is I want to lead you on to kind of utilising that process to start making bootlegs, because really that's all you're doing. When I'm making a track, I'm just taking pieces of audio, I'm adding synths, which is a sort of another level, but essentially it's just audio eventually, and I'm just layering it. So I'm adding a kick, I'm adding a snare, I'm adding a synth, I'm adding a bass, you know, I'm adding hi-hats, and all of a sudden, like with the DJ mix that we've got there, we have you know, we have a track made and we arrange it. So I'm going to go through, I'll probably actually go through this track, this bootleg that I did the other day. I purposefully did it in Ableton on this PC, which is not my studio computer. It's just a basic run-of-the-mill PC with a little tiny 25, I don't know if I can move the thing around, but basically got that little keyboard there, and that's it. You know, there really is very little going on, because just, you know, I don't want you to think that there's like loads of clever stuff that you need. You genuinely don't. So have a play around with that, and I'll have a look at the other one. I'll have a look at doing the other video maybe early next week or over the weekend if I get a chance. That's all from me. I'll see you later.